The day was hot and silent in Delhi. It was one of those afternoons where the sun refused to move, where the air felt like it was listening. Cameras were everywhere. Security guards stood tall. Journalists whispered into microphones. But the real tension wasn't outside. It was inside the old hall of the Prime Minister's residence. Sundar Pichai sat beside his mother, Lakshmi Pichai. His suit was pressed. His eyes were calm but alert. He had been here before, in front of world leaders and global media. But today was different. Today wasn't about him. Prime Minister Narendra Modi walked in with quiet strength. The hall stood up, clapping politely. Sundar nodded in respect. Lakshmi folded her hands and bowed slightly. Modi smiled back, but there was something else in his eyes. Something soft, something curious. After a few formal greetings, Modi took a seat, facing Sundar and Lakshmi. No one knew why he had called this meeting personally. Numbered journalists were allowed to ask questions. This was private, personal. Modi leaned forward and looked at Lakshmi. You raised the CEO of Google, he said gently. But I want to ask you, what did you teach him that the world didn't? The room fell silent. Even Sundar didn't expect that question. Lakshmi looked at the floor for a moment. Then she smiled. Not a proud smile, a humble one. A smile of memory. Double quotes. I taught him how to carry water before asking for tea, she said. Softly, Modi blinked. Double quotes. I taught him how to clean his own shoes before dreaming of planes. I taught him how to eat with one hand and give with the other. And I never let him forget where his slippers were from, even if he wore Italian shoes now. The Prime Minister didn't speak. Neither did Sundar. Lakshmi continued. We were poor. Not always, but enough to remember. Sundar walked 2 kilometers for school. Sometimes we didn't have enough for books. But I told him, knowledge comes free, truth comes hard. Earn both. Sundar looked away. His eyes burned. Lakshmi's voice didn't shake. It was calm, like a river that had seen both drought and flood. Once Sundar came home crying. Some boys laughed at his English, said he would never be anything. That night, I didn't comfort him. I made him sit down and read out loud for 1 hour. Then, I asked him to stand in front of a mirror and say, I am enough. The room breathed again, slowly, carefully. Modi leaned back and looked at Sundar. And what do you think now, Beta? He asked. Sundar turned to his mother. Uma's words made me who I am. Every time I was about to give up, I remembered the mirror. Modi smiled. It was not political. It was human. Then he said something unexpected. Lakshmi ji, India needs mothers like you. Not just for CEOs, but for the soul of this country. Lakshmi's eyes filled with quiet tears. Not for pride, not for fame, but for being seen. And Sundar. He had faced presidents, billionaires, world leaders, but nothing had touched him like this. In that moment, he didn't feel like the CEO of Google. He felt like a boy again, sitting at the edge of his mother's saree, listening to her voice, learning how to live. And that was just the beginning. The next morning, Delhi was buzzing. News channels were careful not to say too much, because the meeting had been private. But somehow, a few words had leaked. I taught him to carry water before asking for tea. Those words were everywhere. But inside Sundar's heart, it wasn't the media storm that mattered. It was the storm inside him. He couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about the mirror, about the night his mother didn't hug him but handed him a book instead. He remembered how angry he had been that night, how cold the floor had felt beneath his feet, how his tears had soaked the page before he could read the first line. But he had read, and he had looked in the mirror. Not once, but every single night after that. That day, after breakfast, Modi invited Lakshmi and Sundar to the garden. No cameras, no crowd, just 3 people, and the sound of rustling leaves. Modi spoke first. I want you to tell me your story, Lakshmi ji. Not Sundar's story. Yours. Lakshmi smiled. Then she looked at her son. Do you remember what I used to do before I started selling saris? She asked. Sundar nodded slowly. You worked in the railway office. No, she said softly. Before that, his face went blank. I used to clean the same platform where you later waited for trains to take you to IT. I was a cleaning lady. I never told you. The words hit Sundar like a wave of cold water. You used to work nights. Said it was data entry, he whispered. Lakshmi nodded. Yes, I was entering data too, but into life, into your future. Modi leaned forward. Why didn't you ever tell him? Because shame is heavy when you carry it alone. But it becomes light when you turn it into fuel, she said. Tears slipped down Sundar's face, but he didn't wipe them away. Every morning, I came home before you woke up. I washed up, made your breakfast, and sat at the table like nothing happened. I didn't want you to see your mother as someone the world stepped over. I wanted you to see me as someone who stood quietly beside you, without asking for credit. Modi stayed silent. Then Lakshmi smiled again. But now that you are here, and you carry the name of India wherever you go, I don't mind you knowing, because shame becomes honor when your child walks with honesty. Sundar held his mother's hand. For the first time in decades, he felt like he was seeing her fully, not just as his Uma, but as a warrior, a builder, a woman who had quietly shaped the world through a boy she never let break. Modi said gently, there are many stories of men who build companies. Few of the mothers who built the men. Lakshmi shook her head. I didn't build him. I just didn't let him fall. They sat in silence again. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of respect. And as the sun moved through the trees above, Sundar looked at his mother and whispered something. I think I finally understand why you made me look in that mirror. Lakshmi nodded. It was never about English, Sundar. It was about seeing who you are before the world tells you who to be. The day after the garden conversation, Sundar sat alone in his old bedroom in Chennai. The room hadn't changed much. The paint was still chipped in the corners. The small wooden desk where he once solved physics problems was still there. His mother had never thrown anything away. He found an old mirror behind the cupboard, dusty, cracked on the side, but still standing. He wiped it gently with his hand. And there, staring back at him, was not the CEO of Google. Not a billionaire. Not a global icon, just a boy, with questions. He looked over his shoulder. His mother's voice floated in from the other room. Sundar, come here. I want to show you something. He walked in and found her sitting on the floor with a large steel box in front of her. It was the same box she had always kept locked. He had never opened it. Lakshmi lifted the lid. Inside was not gold, not documents, not photos, just fabric, old saris, some faded, some torn, but neatly folded. Do you remember this one? She asked, holding up a bright green sari. You wore it at my school award ceremony, Sundar said. Double quotes, yes, she smiled. It was borrowed. He looked at her in surprise. I returned it that evening. I had only borrowed it for 2 hours. From a neighbor. She reached deeper into the box and pulled out a red one. This one, she said, I wore the day your IT result came. I thought you had bought it for that day, he whispered. Lakshmi laughed gently. No, I stitched it from leftover fabric. And I told myself that even if we didn't have money, we could still have celebration. Then she pulled out a white cotton sari. It was thin, worn at the edges, but still neatly folded. This one never tore, she said. I wore it while cleaning the railway platform. Sundar sat beside her on the floor. Oma, he said slowly, why did you keep all of these? Lakshmi looked at him with deep eyes. Because these are not just clothes. They are chapters, reminders of where we were, what we faced, and how we moved. Do you ever wish you had more? Sundar asked. Lakshmi smiled softly. I had enough. Maybe not more, but enough. and enough is where love grows. They sat in silence. Then Lakshmi took the red saree and placed it gently in Sundar's lap. I want you to take this one. Keep it with you, not for the color, but for the memory of a mother who danced in her heart the day her son's future changed. Sundar didn't say anything. His throat closed. His hands gripped the fabric like it was sacred. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was a message from the Prime Minister's office. Prime Minister Modi invites you and your mother for a small dinner tomorrow. No media, just stories. Lakshmi looked at her son. Do you think we should go? Sundar wiped his eyes and smiled. Double quotes, no, I think we must. And in that moment, he knew. He was not carrying his mother's legacy in speeches, or interviews, or awards. He was carrying it in folded fabric, in small memories, in stitched strength, and in that box of old saris. There were no medals, but there was greatness. The evening arrived with a quiet breeze in Delhi. Not the kind of evening with red carpets or bright lights. This was different. This was personal. Sundar and Lakshmi walked side by side into the Prime Minister's residence. No cameras followed them, no press stood outside the gates. Just a quiet invitation, honored with presence, not performance. Lakshmi wore a simple beige sari, the same one she had worn the day Sundar left for the United States. Sundar wore no tie, no badge, just a plain kurta, his mother's choice. When they entered, Prime Minister Modi greeted them not with formality, but with folded hands and a smile. Today, he said, you are not guests, you are family. The dinner was set in the courtyard, under open sky. The table was small, enough for 3. Simple steel plates, clay cups, banana leaves folded neatly at the sides. My mother would have liked this, Lakshmi said. Modi smiled. Mine too. The meal began quietly. Homemade khichdi, curd chutney, some mango pickle on the side. Wine, no dessert. Just stories. Modi spoke first. Lakshmi ji, when did you first know Sundar was special? She thought for a moment. He wasn't, not in the beginning, she said, laughing gently. He was quiet, afraid of loud voices. Never raised his hand in class, but he had something else. What was that? Modi asked. He listened. Not just 2 people, 2 silence, 2 small things. She turned to Sundar. Do you remember the transistor you repaired with a pencil and thread? He smiled, remembering. You didn't fix it because you were brilliant. You fixed it because you were patient. Modi looked at Sundar. And you, Beta. When did you realize your mother had done something others hadn't? Sundar looked down at his plate. Not until very late, he said. When I saw other people freeze under pressure. When I saw brilliant minds fall because no one taught them resilience. Oma never told me to be first. She told me to stand back up. They continued eating. Birds flew above. The city hummed far away. Lakshmi turned the conversation. Prime Minister Ji, she said gently, you asked about what I taught my son. May I ask what your mother taught you? Modi looked into the distance for a long moment. She taught me silence, he said. In a world of shouting, she showed me the strength of stillness. Then he smiled, almost to himself, and once, she told me, if your truth is heavy, carry it alone until the world is ready. Lakshmi nodded slowly. Truth has weight, but it also has wings. The dinner ended with chai in small steel cups, not served by waiters, but by the Prime Minister himself. He poured each cup, careful not to spill a drop. As he handed one to Lakshmi, he said softly, for all the times your hands served others without being served in return. She accepted it with both hands. And then, something unexpected happened. Modi reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded white envelope. This is not from the government, he said. This is from me, personally. Inside is a letter. Not an award, not a document, just my words. because sometimes gratitude must be handwritten. Lakshmi took it gently and placed it in her purse without opening it. "Thank you," she said, and in that small courtyard, without cameras or applause, 3 people sat not as leader, icon, or mother, but as human beings, sharing stories, sipping tea, and reminding each other what greatness really looks like. The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the old curtains of Lakshmi's room. She sat at the window, holding the envelope Modi had given her the night before. Her fingers traced the edges like she was holding something sacred. She had not opened it yet. Sundar walked in quietly, a cup of coffee in his hand. He placed it beside her without a word. Lakshmi looked at her son and smiled. "Do you want to read it?" "Only if you want me to," he said. She nodded. He sat beside her. She slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note, on simple white paper. No seal, no logo, just plain ink. Sundar read aloud, "Dear Lakshmi ji, you may never stand on world stages or lead nations, but you have done something far greater. You have raised a son who stands tall without stepping on others, who leads without shouting, who shines without burning anyone else. The strength of a country does not come from its towers or technology. It comes from homes like yours, small kitchens with big dreams, quiet prayers whispered over rice, worn saris, holding together the dignity of generations. Thank you for being India's quiet flame. With deepest respect, Narendra Modi." When Sundar finished reading, his voice cracked. He looked at his mother. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were full. "I never expected this," she whispered. "Not from a prime minister. Not from anyone." "You deserve it, Oma," Sundar said softly. "Lakshm." I folded the letter and placed it on the windowsill, beside the old brass lamp. She lit every morning. Then she turned to her son. "Do you know why I light this lamp every day, even when you're not home?" He shook his head. "Because one day, when you were 9, you said you were afraid of the dark. I told you, darkness outside doesn't matter if the light inside is strong. Ever since that day I light this for you, not to remove the dark, but to remind you you are not alone." Sundar reached for her hand and held it tightly. "Hama, there's something I've been thinking about." "What is it?" "I want to start something. Not for Google, not for business. For you, for women like you." Her eyes narrowed with curiosity. "A foundation," he said, "to support single mothers, widows, women working small jobs, those who raise children in silence, who build futures without being seen." Lakshmi said nothing, then she smiled. A soft, proud, quiet smile. "Don't name it after me," she said. "Why not?" "Because this story is not about one mother, it's about millions." Sundar nodded. "Then we'll call it the quiet lamp." She looked at him. "Perfect," she whispered. Just then, the power cut out. The fan stopped. The room fell into a still silence. Without a word, Lakshmi stood up and lit the brass lamp. Its glow filled the room. "See," she said, "this is why we light it." And in that small room, in a modest house in Chennai, the world changed again. Not with noise, but with a flame. A few weeks passed. Delhi moved on. The world kept spinning. Google launched a new product. Headlines came and went. But something deeper had shifted quietly, like most powerful things do. One morning Sundar received a phone call from a university. In India, they were organizing a special event to honor unsung heroes, people who had made great contributions to society, not through awards or titles, but through simple, powerful acts of goodness. They wanted Lakshmi Pichai to speak. Sundar hesitated. "She's not a speaker," he said. "She never even liked being called special." But the voice on the other end was gentle. "That's why we chose her." When Sundar told his mother, she looked at him with soft confusion. "Me? What would I say?" "Anything," he said. "Or nothing. Even your silence teaches more than most speeches." Lakshmi didn't answer that day. She just returned to her chores. But the next morning, she quietly took out the same beige sari she had worn to the Prime Minister's dinner, and she began ironing it. That was her yes. The hall was packed. No cameras. Just students, mothers, teachers, some with tears already in their eyes. The dean gave a small introduction. Today, we welcome not a politician, not a CEO, but the woman who taught one how to become one. Lakshmi walked slowly onto the stage. No music played. She held no papers. She wore no makeup. Just her sari, her strength, and a quiet smile. For a moment, she stood silently. Then she began. When Sundar was a little boy, she said, he once asked me why some people had cars and others didn't. A few people chuckled softly. I told him, some people have wheels under their feet, and some have fire in their heart. Both can take you places, but one runs out of petrol, the other doesn't. The crowd listened, leaning forward. I didn't raise a leader. I raised a listener. I didn't teach him to command. I taught him to understand. Her voice was calm, clear. Every word felt like it had been folded carefully and passed through generations. To all the young people here, she continued, you don't need a big house to have big dreams. And you don't need English to speak truth. You need courage, and patience, and respect. Then she looked directly at one row where a girl sat, holding her mother's hand. To the mothers here, she said, your work may never be on TV. Your name may never be in a book. But remember, every time your child gets back up after falling, your story continues. The hall went silent. Then, slowly, a standing ovation began. Lakshmi bowed gently, not in pride, but in gratitude. Backstage, Sundar waited. When she came down, he handed her a small box. Inside was a brooch shaped like a lamp. For you, Amma, he whispered. The quiet lamp. She held it in her palm, then pinned it to her sari, without saying a word. Outside, the sun was setting. They walked toward the car, no cameras following. Just two shadows side by side, and for the first time in her life, Lakshmi Pichai had stood on a stage not for her son's success, but for her own story. The story she never told. The story the world finally heard. Months passed. The story of Lakshmi Pichai had spread far beyond what anyone expected. Students began mentioning her in essays. Mothers wrote letters to her. Small libraries in remote villages requested copies of her speech, printed in newspapers, to hang on their walls. But Lakshmi returned to her quiet life in Chennai. She still bought vegetables from the same shop. Still lit the brass lamp each morning. Still made filter coffee the same way she always had. Fame never changed her, because she had never asked for it. One evening, Sundar returned home from a long international trip. He had just spoken at a major global tech conference, but something felt different this time. They asked me about leadership, he told her. And for the first time, I didn't talk about systems or innovation. Lakshmi looked up from her sewing. What did you say? I told them about the mirror, and about the night you didn't hug me, but gave me a book. She smiled gently. What did they say? They clapped, but more than that, they listened. He paused, and I think they finally understood. Lakshmi nodded slowly. Good, she said. But don't forget, even the mirror needs dusting now and then. They both laughed quietly. Later that week, Sundar visited a new center under construction. The sign outside read, The Quiet Lamp Foundation. Inside, there were classrooms for digital education, support groups for working mothers, and a small museum that told the stories of women who had raised leaders, artists, farmers, and builders, all without ever leaving their neighborhoods. At the center of the museum was a single display case. Inside was an old, red saree, and beside it, a small handwritten card. This saree was worn by Lakshmi Pichai, mother of Sundar Pichai, on the day he passed the exam that would change his life. It was stitched from leftover fabric, but it carried more strength than any uniform ever could. Thousands would walk past that sari. Some would pause, some would cry, some would feel seen for the first time. But Lakshmi never visited the museum. When asked why, she said simply, "I already lived that life. It's for others to learn from now." Years later, Sundar stood on a global stage once more. The room was silent. Leaders from every country waited for his words. He looked down at his notes, then looked up and said, "Before I begin, I want to thank the woman who never asked to be thanked." The screen behind him lit up not with charts or slides but with an old photo of a woman in a beige sari, holding a steel cup of chai, standing in a small kitchen. "Her name is Lakshmi Pichai," he said, "and everything I am began in that kitchen, and in living rooms across the world, in villages, in cities, in countries where people had never even heard the name Pichai before. Mothers sat a little taller, fathers listened a little longer, and children saw their parents with new eyes. Lakshmi, meanwhile, watched from her home. She didn't clap, she didn't cry, she just lit the brass lamp again, like she did every night, and whispered the same quiet words she always did. Let him remember who he is, because in the end, the world may applaud success, but it is love, stitched in silence, that builds it."